Rain tapped softly against the glass windows of a small-town cafe on a lonely evening. The street outside was almost empty, only the sound of water and wind passing by. Inside, warm lights glowed across wooden tables, and the smell of fresh coffee filled the air. It was the kind of place where people came to escape the noise of the world. At a corner table sat an elderly woman named Mrs. Grace. Her silver hair was tied neatly, her dark skin glowing under the soft yellow light. She wore a simple brown coat, her hands gently holding a cup of tea. She smiled kindly at the waitress every time she passed by, and her eyes carried a calmness that only life's storms could teach. She had been visiting this cafe every evening for years, a small habit that gave her peace. The door suddenly opened with a loud push, breaking the quiet mood. A man in his mid-30s stepped in, shaking off the rain from his jacket. His name was Kyle Bennett. His face was tense, his eyes tired, and anger seemed to live inside him like a shadow. He looked around quickly, impatient and restless. The waitress, a young woman named Emily, greeted him with a gentle smile. "Good evening, sir. Would you like a seat?" "Just bring me coffee," Kyle snapped without looking at her. His tone was sharp, his voice filled with irritation. He threw himself onto the nearest chair and began tapping his fingers on the table. Emily nodded politely and hurried toward the counter, but her smile had faded. Across the room, Mrs. Grace noticed everything. She didn't judge him, she had seen angry people before. Sometimes, anger came from pain that people couldn't explain. She watched quietly as Emily brought his coffee. Kyle snatched the cup, spilling a few drops on the table. "What's this?" "It's cold already," he shouted. Emily tried to explain that the coffee had just been brewed, but he cut her off with another angry word. The cafe fell silent. A few people turned their heads but quickly looked away. No one wanted trouble. The only sound was the soft rain outside. Mrs. Grace took a slow sip of her tea, then looked at Kyle with calm eyes. "Son," she said softly, "anger will not warm your coffee." Kyle turned his head sharply toward her. "Excuse me?" His voice was hard, full of disbelief that someone dared to speak to him. She smiled gently. "You seem troubled. But shouting won't fix what's broken inside you." That simple, kind voice hit him harder than he expected. He felt everyone's eyes on him. The embarrassment burned his pride. "Lady, mind your own business," he snapped, his hand tightening on the cup. Mrs. Grace didn't move. "Sometimes," she said, "a stranger's words are meant to help, not to hurt." Kyle's face turned red. "You think you know me? You don't know anything about my life." His voice echoed through the cafe. Emily stepped back, whispering, "Sir, please calm down." But Kyle stood up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Old people think they can say whatever they want," he shouted. Then, in a sudden flash of anger, Kyle's hand moved. The sound of a slap cut through the quiet air. The entire cafe froze. Mrs. Grace's head turned slightly from the impact, her tea spilling onto the table. Emily gasped. A man dropped his fork. The rain outside seemed to stop for a moment. Mrs. Grace didn't cry. She didn't shout. She simply looked up at Kyle with sad eyes, eyes that carried both pain and forgiveness. "May God help you, son," she whispered. Kyle's chest heaved with heavy breaths. Reality hit him slowly, what he had just done. The anger began to melt into fear. People started murmuring, some pulling out their phones, others whispering in shock. In the far corner of the cafe, a man who had been sitting quietly the whole time finally moved. He had short cropped hair, a black jacket, and a calm face that didn't show emotion. He had been watching since Kyle entered. Now, he stood up slowly, his chair sliding back with a faint sound. Everyone's eyes turned toward him. He walked over to Mrs. Grace, his steps slow but firm. His presence carried a weight that made Kyle step back without even realizing it. The man gently placed his hand on Mrs. Grace's shoulder. Are you all right, Mom? He asked softly. The word Mom hit the air like a quiet explosion. The cafe went completely silent again. Kyle blinked, his mouth opening slightly. Mom, he repeated in confusion. Mrs. Grace nodded, her lips trembling slightly but still calm. The man turned his eyes to Kyle. His look wasn't angry, it was colder, sharper, and far more dangerous. He didn't need to raise his voice. Do you have any idea, he said quietly, who you just put your hands on? Kyle couldn't speak. The man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something, a small black leather badge holder. He flipped it open slowly, just enough for Kyle and the nearby customers to see the golden letters. FBI. The air in the cafe grew heavy. Emily's eyes widened. One customer gasped. Kyle's heart pounded. He took a step back, his voice shaking. I didn't know. I didn't mean to. The man didn't move closer. His expression stayed the same, calm but powerful. You didn't know, he repeated softly. You never know until it's too late. He turned to Mrs. Grace. Let's go, Mom. Mrs. Grace stood slowly, her dignity untouched. As she passed Kyle, she said gently, sometimes life gives us mirrors, not enemies. The man guided her to the door, opening it for her as the rain fell harder outside. Before leaving, he looked back at Kyle, just one cold, unreadable stare that sent shivers through the room. Kyle stood frozen, unable to move, unable to speak. The cafe was silent again, but this time, it wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of regret, the silence before everything changes. Outside, the rain washed the streets clean, but inside Kyle's heart, a storm had just begun. The cafe remained frozen in a strange silence after Mrs. Grace and her son stepped outside into the rain. For a few long seconds, no one spoke. Only the faint echo of the doorbell and the sound of rain dripping from the rooftop filled the air. Kyle stood where he was, his hand trembling slightly, the warmth of his anger gone and replaced by a cold feeling in his chest. The reality of what he had done began to settle in, heavier with every passing second. Outside, Mrs. Grace leaned on her son's arm as they reached a black car parked near the curb. The man, Marcus Grace, an FBI agent known for his sharp mind and quiet power, opened the car door for her. Sit down, Mom, he said gently. She looked up at him with calm, loving eyes. Don't be angry, Marcus, she whispered. He's lost in his own pain. Marcus didn't respond. His jaw tightened, but his silence carried more emotion than words ever could. After making sure his mother was safe inside the car, Marcus turned back toward the cafe. The rain ran down his face, but his eyes stayed fixed on the door. Inside, people were whispering now. The waitress Emily stood near the counter, trying to understand what just happened. When Marcus stepped back into the cafe, the air shifted again. He walked straight toward Kyle, who was still standing near the same table, his heart racing. Sit down, Marcus said quietly. It wasn't a request. His voice was low, controlled, and calm, but there was something in it that made everyone else step back. Kyle obeyed without thinking, sitting slowly. Marcus pulled out a chair across from him and sat down. His eyes were steady, his face unreadable. You hit an old woman, he said softly. Why? Kyle swallowed hard. I didn't mean to. She was talking to me, and I just lost control. I'm sorry. Sorry? Marcus leaned slightly forward. You think sorry takes away the pain? You think it fixes what you broke? Kyle lowered his head, unable to look into those cold eyes. Please. I didn't know she was your mother, he whispered. Marcus's lips curved slightly, but it wasn't a smile. Would it have mattered? He asked. Would you have acted differently if she wasn't? The question hit Kyle like a knife. He didn't have an answer. His mouth opened, then closed again. The people in the cafe were silent, pretending not to watch, but no one looked away. Marcus leaned back in his chair. You walk around full of anger, hurting whoever stands in your way. One day, that anger was going to destroy you. Today, it almost did. Kyle's eyes filled with tears, but Marcus didn't soften. I didn't want to hurt her, Kyle said quietly. I lost everything. My job, my wife, my house. I'm angry at the world. I don't even know who I am anymore. Marcus stared at him for a long moment, then said, And you decided to take it out on a woman old enough to be your grandmother? Kyle covered his face with his hands, his voice breaking. I know I'm a horrible person. I wish I could take it back. The police arrived just then, lights flashing outside the cafe. 2 officers stepped in, one of them asking, We got a call about an assault? Emily pointed toward Kyle. But Marcus raised a hand calmly. It's handled, he said. He pulled out his FBI badge, and the officers immediately paused. Agent Grace, one of them said respectfully. You need us to take the suspect in? Marcus shook his head. Not yet. The officers nodded and stepped back, waiting near the door. Kyle looked confused. You're not arresting me? Marcus's eyes met his. Not yet, he said again. I want to know what kind of man you are first. Because right now, all I see is a man who hides behind his anger. Kyle said nothing. His throat felt dry, his hands shaking. Marcus stood slowly. I should have you in handcuffs right now, he said quietly. But my mother believes in forgiveness. She asked me not to hurt you. So I won't. Kyle looked up in shock. She said that? Marcus nodded. Even after what you did, she still wanted to protect you. That's the kind of woman you hit today. For the first time, Kyle felt true shame. His eyes burned, and he couldn't stop the tears from falling. I'm so sorry, he whispered again, this time with real pain in his voice. Marcus looked at him for a long time. His tone softened slightly, though his eyes stayed cold. If you truly mean that, then prove it, he said. Because words are cheap. People throw them around like coins, hoping they can buy forgiveness. But forgiveness must be earned. He walked toward the door, the rain still pouring outside. Before leaving, he stopped and turned back. The next time you decide to raise your hand against someone weaker, he said, remember this moment. Because next time, I won't be calm. The door closed behind him. The sound of the rain swallowed everything else. Kyle sat alone at the table, his coffee now cold, untouched. Emily walked slowly over to him, her voice quiet. You should be grateful, sir, she said. Most people wouldn't walk away after what you did. Kyle didn't answer. He just stared at the window, watching the rain fall harder, realizing that his life had just changed, and that he didn't even understand how yet. Outside, Marcus stood by his car, watching his mother through the window. She smiled faintly at him, the kind of smile that could calm storms. You did the right thing, she said softly when he got in. Marcus nodded, starting the engine. Maybe, he replied. But something tells me this isn't over yet. And as the car drove away into the rain, the camera of fate stayed on Kyle, sitting alone, broken, silent, and unaware that his real test was only just beginning. Rain poured harder that night, blurring the streets into rivers of silver light. The cafe lights dimmed one by one as the last customers left, leaving only the echo of what had happened behind. But inside Kyle's mind, the scene kept replaying, the slap, the silence, and the man's eyes that looked like judgment itself. He had no idea why those calm words from Agent Marcus felt heavier than any punishment. Kyle walked home through the wet streets, his jacket soaked, his heart pounding. Every step felt heavier. He wanted to believe it was over, that the man had spared him. But deep inside, a voice whispered, "This isn't done yet." When he reached his small, messy apartment, he dropped his coat on the floor, stared at himself in the mirror, and hated what he saw. His reflection looked like a stranger, eyes empty, face hollow, anger still hiding behind the sadness. He whispered to himself, "What have I become?" Miles away, inside a quiet FBI office, Marcus Gray sat at his desk. The office was almost empty, except for the soft hum of computers and the ticking clock on the wall. He should have been home resting, but his mind refused to stop replaying the cafe scene. He opened his laptop, typed a few commands, and pulled up the database. The name Kyle Bennett appeared on his screen. Marcus stared at it for a moment, then started digging. He didn't do it out of revenge, not exactly. It was something else. A need to understand why. Why a man could fall so far into anger that he'd raise his hand against an innocent old woman. Marcus began scanning through Kyle's record, unpaid bills, late rent notices, a termination letter from his job as a delivery driver. Then he opened the criminal file. There it was, 2 previous charges for public fighting, 1 dismissed, 1 on probation. Anger issues, complaints from neighbors, a restraining order from an ex-wife named Laura. Marcus leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. "So that's what you've been running from," he murmured. He wasn't angry anymore, he was curious. What breaks a man so badly that he starts breaking others? He clicked through social media photos, old smiling pictures of Kyle with his wife and a little boy, both gone now. Then, years later, a photo of Kyle alone, holding a beer, eyes lost. Marcus felt something tighten inside him. He knew that look. He had seen it on too many faces before, men who'd let pain turn into poison. Just then, his phone buzzed. It was his FBI partner, Agent Claire Dalton, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who always saw right through him. "Still at work?" she asked. Marcus sighed. "Couldn't sleep." "About the guy from the cafe?" He nodded, even though she couldn't see it. "He hit my mother." There was silence for a moment. "You serious?" she said softly. Marcus's voice dropped. "I've seen worse men in my line of work. But something about him, he's broken, not evil. My mom asked me to forgive him." Claire exhaled. "You going to?" "I don't know yet," Marcus said. "But I want to understand him first." Claire hesitated. "Be careful, Marcus. You start digging into personal cases, the Bureau won't like it." Marcus gave a small, tired smile. "They won't find out." After the call ended, Marcus stared again at Kyle's photo. Then he clicked one last link, a background check showing that Kyle's probation ended 6 months ago, but his anger management sessions were marked incomplete. "Figures," Marcus muttered. The next morning, Kyle woke up to the sound of knocking on his door. He opened it slowly, and froze. Standing there, in a crisp black jacket, was Marcus. Kyle's eyes widened. "Agent Grace?" Marcus's voice was calm, just like before. "We need to talk." Kyle stepped aside, nervous, his small apartment cluttered with papers, empty bottles, and old pizza boxes. Marcus looked around without judgment but with quiet observation. "Rough place," he said simply. Kyle gave a weak laugh. "Yeah. You can say that." Marcus sat on a chair near the window. "You've been angry for a long time," he said. "And I think I know why. You've lost a lot." Kyle frowned. "You went through my life?" Marcus looked straight at him. "I'm an investigator. It's my job to know what people hide from themselves." Kyle rubbed his face. "So what now? You're gonna arrest me?" Marcus shook his head. "No. Not yet. My mother doesn't want that." Kyle blinked, confused. "Why?" "I don't deserve forgiveness." Marcus stood up. "Maybe not. But she believes people can change. I want to see if she's right." He walked toward the door but paused. "You've been running from your anger for years, Kyle. Every time something hurts, you hit back at the world. But one day, the world will hit back harder. Kyle swallowed hard. So what do you want from me? Marcus looked at him with steady eyes. I want you to face what you've done, and who you've become. I'll be watching. He left before Kyle could answer, the sound of the closing door echoing in the small apartment. For the rest of the day, Kyle couldn't think of anything else. He tried to eat, couldn't. Tried to sleep, couldn't. That calm man's words echoed in his head like thunder. I'll be watching. Later that evening, Marcus sat with his mother at her house. She poured him a cup of tea, just the way she used to when he was a child. You looked into him, didn't you? She asked quietly. Marcus didn't deny it. Yes. He's not a good man, Mom. But he's not hopeless either. Mrs. Grace smiled faintly. Everyone carries a story, Marcus. Some just forget how to tell it. He looked at her, her soft eyes reflecting a strength that humbled him. You're too kind, he said. I'm just old enough to know anger destroys the angry first, she replied. You'll see, son. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most need saving the most. Marcus didn't answer, but her words stayed with him long after he drove home. That night, he opened his laptop again, reading Kyle's file one last time. Then, with a deep sigh, he closed it and whispered to himself, All right, Mom. I'll give him a chance. But as he stared out the window into the dark, a strange feeling crept into his chest, the sense that something was coming. Something that would test both Kyle's redemption and his own faith in forgiveness. Outside, the rain finally stopped, leaving the streets shining under the dim glow of the streetlights. But in both their hearts, Marcus's and Kyle's, a different kind of storm was just beginning. Morning sunlight crept slowly through the blinds of Marcus's apartment, painting long, quiet lines across the floor. He hadn't slept much. The memory of the cafe, his mother's calm face, Kyle's trembling hands, replayed again and again in his head. Something inside him refused to rest. He had seen dangerous men before, liars, criminals, killers, but Kyle Bennett was different. There was rage in him, yes, but there was also regret. It was a rare, confusing mix Marcus couldn't ignore. He brewed his coffee, sat by his laptop, and opened the file again. On the surface, Kyle's past seemed ordinary, just another man crushed by life's weight. But as Marcus read deeper, patterns began to appear, small details that didn't fit. Kyle had worked for a delivery company for 5 years. Before that, a construction job. Before that, 2 years missing, no record of employment, no tax, nothing. Marcus frowned. Where were you hiding, Mr. Bennett? He murmured. He clicked a few more links, tracing phone records, addresses, old police reports. Then he found something strange, a fight report from a bar outside the city, 3 years ago. A man named Kyle Bennett had been questioned after a brawl that ended with serious injuries. The file was marked closed, witnesses refused to testify. Marcus leaned back in his chair. So you've seen violence before, he said quietly. And you've walked away from it every time. His phone rang. It was Agent Claire Dalton again. Still on your little side mission? She asked dryly. Marcus smiled faintly. You could call it that. Be careful, she said. Internal Affairs is already asking why you're digging into a civilian without a case number. Marcus's tone hardened. He hit my mother. That's case enough. Marcus, Claire said softly, you're not angry about the slap. You're angry because he reminds you of something. Maybe yourself. He paused. Her words hit deeper than he wanted to admit. I'm nothing like him, he said quietly. Maybe not, she replied. But you both live in silence and hold on to pain longer than you should. Marcus hung up without answering. He stared at the screen again, feeling something twist inside him. Claire was right. There was something about Kyle that hit close to home. Maybe because Marcus had once watched his own father destroy himself with anger after losing everything. Maybe because he saw what bitterness could turn a man into. Later that afternoon, Marcus drove to the neighborhood where Kyle used to live before his divorce. The area was quiet but worn, peeling paint, broken mailboxes, kids playing soccer on the cracked street. He found the old house, a small white building with faded blue shutters. A woman stood on the porch watering plants. "Excuse me," Marcus said as he approached. "You must be Mrs. Daniels?" She looked up, cautious. "Yes." "Who are you?" "Agent Marcus Grace. I'm looking into someone who used to live next door." "Kyle Bennett." Her eyes softened with memory. "Kyle, yes, I remember him. Kind man once. Used to help me carry groceries. But after his wife left, he changed. He stopped talking, stopped smiling. I heard shouting sometimes at night. Then one day, he just disappeared." "His wife?" Marcus asked. "She moved away. Said she couldn't handle his temper. Poor thing had a son too, maybe 10 years old." Marcus felt a weight in his chest. "Where is she now?" "Out of state, I think. She wanted a quiet life for her boy." Kyle never visited them again. He thanked her and walked back to his car, the sound of kids playing fading behind him. He sat inside for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. Now it made sense, the anger, the bitterness, the self-hate. Kyle had lost his family because of his own hands, and instead of fixing himself, he buried his pain under rage. That night, Marcus went to his mother's house again. Mrs. Grace was sitting by the window, knitting a scarf. She smiled when he entered. "You look tired, son," she said. Marcus sat beside her. "I found out more about him," he said quietly. "He had a family once. A wife. A kid. He lost them because of his temper." Mrs. Grace didn't look surprised. Anger steals everything good before a man even notices. Marcus frowned. "He's done this before, Mom. I saw the reports. He hurt people." "And yet," she said softly, "you didn't arrest him." Marcus was silent. He looked at his mother, small, gentle, wise. "You still believe he can change?" She nodded. "If I stopped believing in change, I'd stop believing in people." "And then what's left, Marcus?" Her words touched something deep in him. He wanted to protect her, but maybe she was right, maybe forgiveness was a stronger shield than punishment. The next morning, Marcus received a call from Claire. "You might want to see this," she said. Our background scan flagged something unusual." "What is it?" "A payment record. Kyle received a large amount of money 2 years ago, cash deposit, untraceable source. Could be nothing, or could be something dangerous." Marcus straightened. "Send it to me." When he opened the file, his eyes narrowed. The deposit came from an account linked to a company that the FBI had quietly investigated for illegal weapons trading last year. "So that's your missing 2 years," Marcus whispered. "You weren't just angry, you were involved with something." The air in his office grew heavy. What had started as a moment of personal anger was now turning into something much darker. That evening, Marcus drove again, this time to the same cafe where it all began. The rain had returned, and the lights inside glowed warmly through the mist. Kyle was there, sitting alone at the same corner table, staring into a half-empty cup. Marcus walked in quietly. When Kyle saw him, he froze. "You again?" Marcus sat down across from him, calm as ever. "I told you I'd be watching." Kyle's voice trembled slightly. "Are you here to arrest me now?" Marcus looked straight into his eyes. "That depends. You've got 2 choices, Kyle. Tell me what you were doing 2 years ago, or I'll find out myself." Kyle's eyes flickered with fear. You don't understand. Then make me understand, Marcus said softly. For a moment, Kyle looked like he wanted to run. But then his shoulders slumped, defeated. I made mistakes, he said finally. Big ones. I worked for people I shouldn't have. I thought it was just transport work, but it wasn't. They were moving weapons. I didn't know until it was too late. Marcus's expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened. You're lucky I'm here and not someone else from the bureau. Kyle nodded miserably. I paid for it. I lost everything because of them. And when my wife found out, she took my son and left. Since then, I stopped caring about anything. The cafe went silent again, just like that first night. Marcus leaned back, thinking. He saw a broken man, but also one still capable of truth. After a long pause, Marcus said quietly, You can't change your past, Kyle. But maybe you can stop it from destroying what's left of your soul. Kyle looked at him, confused. Why do you care? I hurt your mother. Marcus gave a faint, almost sad smile. Because she asked me to. Outside, the rain fell harder, washing over the streets like a quiet promise, a promise that the storm inside both men was far from over. Morning light crept over the city, soft and golden, but to Kyle, it felt like another heavy day. He sat on his small couch, staring at the wall, replaying Marcus's words in his head, You can't change your past, but maybe you can stop it from destroying what's left of your soul. Those words echoed louder than any courtroom sentence. For the first time in years, Kyle felt something strange stirring inside him, guilt mixed with a faint hope that maybe, just maybe, he could fix what he'd broken. A knock came at the door. Kyle hesitated before opening it. Marcus stood there again, calm as ever, holding a folder under his arm. His face carried that same cold patience that scared and intrigued Kyle at the same time. You're up early, Kyle muttered. Marcus stepped inside without waiting for permission. You want to make things right? He asked directly. Kyle frowned. Right? After what I've done? There's no right left for me. Marcus placed the folder on the table and opened it. Inside were a few papers, photos, and a form with the government seal. This is a community rehabilitation program. You'll work with a team that helps the elderly and veterans. Cleaning, delivering food, fixing homes. Real work. Real people. It's not a punishment. It's a chance. Kyle stared at the folder, unsure. You're joking. You think helping old people will fix what I did? Marcus's gaze hardened slightly. No. But maybe it will fix you. Kyle let out a bitter laugh. Why do you care if I fix myself? Because my mother does, Marcus replied simply. And because she believes people like you can still change. She asked me not to destroy you. I'm giving you a chance because of her, not because I think you deserve it. Those words hit Kyle like cold water. He looked away. I don't know if I can do this. Marcus leaned forward slightly. You don't need to know. You just need to show up. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., Hope Center on Main Street. If you don't, I'll make sure the bureau reopens your old case. Kyle's head snapped up. That's blackmail. Marcus gave a faint, dry smile. No. It's motivation. Then he stood and left, leaving the folder on the table. That night, Kyle didn't sleep. He opened the folder over and over, staring at the papers, the photos of smiling volunteers helping old men and women, the program's motto, healing through service. Something about that line made his throat tighten. He thought of Mrs. Grace's gentle eyes, even after he'd slapped her. She had looked at him not with hate, but with pity, and somehow, that hurt more than anger ever could. When morning came, Kyle found himself walking toward Hope Center, raincoat pulled tight around him. The building was small but bright, with colorful murals on the wall and a few volunteers gathering supplies. A woman with kind eyes and curly hair greeted him. "You must be Kyle," she said warmly. "Agent Grace told me you'd be coming." Kyle froze. "He told you about me?" She smiled. "Only that you needed a new start. I'm Ms. Alvarez. You'll be helping me with food deliveries this week." Kyle nodded awkwardly, trying to avoid eye contact. The first few hours were uncomfortable, carrying heavy boxes, fixing broken shelves, delivering meals to people who smiled at him like he mattered. He didn't understand why it felt so strange to be treated kindly. One of the men he met that day was Mr. Howard, a war veteran in his 80s. The old man struggled to walk, but his voice was strong. "You new here, son?" he asked. "Yeah," Kyle said quietly, helping him unpack groceries. Howard chuckled. "We all start somewhere. I used to be angry too. Lost my wife. Lost my temper more times than I can count. But then I realized, anger only keeps you company when everyone else leaves." Kyle paused, looking at him. "How did you stop being angry?" Howard smiled faintly. "I didn't. I just learned to forgive myself first. You can't carry fire in your hands and expect not to burn." Those words stayed with Kyle the entire day. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a monster, just a man trying to find a way out of his own darkness. When his shift ended, Marcus was waiting outside, leaning against his car. "How was your first day?" he asked. Kyle shrugged. "Weird. Hard. But not bad." Marcus studied him for a moment. "Did you help anyone?" "I guess," Kyle said. "An old veteran." He said something that made sense. Marcus nodded slightly. "Good. Keep showing up. That's how change starts, quietly." Kyle frowned. "You really think I can change?" Marcus looked away toward the cloudy sky. "I don't know yet. But my mother does. And she's usually right." For the first time, Kyle smiled faintly. "She's something else. I don't know how she could forgive me." Marcus turned to him, his eyes steady. "Because forgiveness isn't about you. It's about who she is." Days turned into weeks. Kyle kept coming back to Hope Center, working harder each time. He fixed fences, painted walls, delivered food to old folks who told him stories about their lives. Slowly, the anger inside him started to melt, replaced by something quieter, peace. Every time he helped someone smile, he felt like a small piece of his own broken self was being rebuilt. And every evening, when he walked home tired but lighter, he thought of Mrs. Grace and her gentle voice saying, "Be kind, son. Anger only burns yourself." One afternoon, as he was cleaning up after a long day, Marcus appeared again. He looked different this time, less distant, more curious. "You've been consistent," Marcus said. "That's good." Kyle smiled weakly. "Feels strange. I thought helping others would be boring. But it feels real. Like I'm finally doing something that matters." Marcus studied him for a moment, then said quietly, "Don't mistake progress for peace. You're changing, but life will test that change." Kyle didn't understand what he meant, not yet. Because in the days to come, a new storm was already forming, one that would push Kyle to his limits, and show whether his redemption was real or just an illusion. Outside, as the sun set behind the city, the same rain clouds began to gather again, a silent promise that the story of forgiveness was far from over. The following week unfolded in quiet patterns. Kyle showed up every morning at Hope Center, helping, fixing, cleaning, and learning. But inside, something deeper was stirring, an ache that grew stronger with each smile he received, each thank you that made him realize what he had taken from others for so long. It was guilt, raw and honest, but for the first time, he didn't run from it. He faced it. One cloudy afternoon, Marcus arrived at the center again, hands in his coat pockets. Kyle was outside repairing a wooden ramp for a wheelchair. Sweat covered his face, but his movements were calm, steady, almost peaceful. Marcus watched him for a moment before saying, "You're not the same man I met in that cafe." Kyle paused, wiping his forehead. "I'm trying not to be." Marcus nodded. "You've done well. But there's one thing left." Kyle frowned. "What do you mean?" Marcus's eyes met his. "My mother wants to see you." The hammer slipped from Kyle's hand, hitting the wood with a dull thud. His heart stopped for a second. "What?" "She asked for you," Marcus continued calmly. "She said she wants to speak to you, alone." Kyle's voice came out barely a whisper. I don't think I can face her. Not after what I did." Marcus stepped closer, his tone steady. "You can't change what happened. But you can decide what it means. This is the moment you prove who you really are." That night, Kyle couldn't sleep. Every sound, every creak, every passing car reminded him of that slap, that moment when anger had blinded him. His hands trembled as he imagined standing before the woman he'd hurt, the one who had somehow chosen forgiveness over hatred. By morning, he made his decision. He would go. The next day, Marcus drove him to his mother's house, a small, peaceful place with a garden full of roses and white lilies. The air smelled of rain and soil. Kyle's throat tightened as he stepped out of the car. Mrs. Grace sat on the porch, wearing a soft gray sweater, her hands resting on her lap. When she looked up and saw him, there was no anger in her eyes, only a calm that felt almost otherworldly. Marcus stayed by the car. "You go ahead," he said quietly. "She's waiting." Kyle walked slowly, each step heavier than the last. His voice broke when he finally spoke. "Ma'am, I don't even know where to start." Mrs. Grace gave a faint smile. "Then start with the truth." He lowered his head. "I hurt you. I don't deserve to stand here. You should hate me. I hate myself every day for what I did." She shook her head gently. "Hate never fixes broken things, son. It only breaks them more." Tears welled in Kyle's eyes. "Why didn't you press charges? Why didn't you let your son destroy me? You had every right." Mrs. Grace looked at him with eyes full of quiet wisdom. "Because I saw something in you that day, pain. Real pain. You were not hitting me, Kyle. You were hitting every moment that life had beaten you down. And I've seen enough pain in my life to know that the only thing stronger than anger is grace." Kyle's breath caught in his throat. "You're forgiving me?" She smiled softly. "I already did. The question is, can you forgive yourself?" Those words hit him harder than any slap could. His knees weakened, and before he realized it, tears streamed down his face. "I don't know if I can," he whispered. Mrs. Grace reached out, her frail hand resting gently on his. "You can. But it takes time. Healing is not a straight line. It bends, it breaks, it hurts. But you keep walking anyway." Marcus watched from the car window, silent. Seeing Kyle kneel before his mother, the same man who had once raised his hand against her, filled him with emotions he couldn't name. Anger, yes. But also something unexpected, respect. Kyle stayed with Mrs. Grace for hours that day. They talked about life, about mistakes, about loneliness. She told him stories about her late husband, about how Marcus had almost quit the FBI once after losing a case that cost an innocent man his life. "We all carry guilt," she said. "But it's what we do with it that defines us." Before he left, she handed him a small paper wrapped with string. "Take this," she said. He opened it carefully. It was a quote written in delicate handwriting. "Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's remembering and choosing to move forward anyway." Kyle held the paper close. His voice trembled. Thank you. I'll never forget this. When he got back into the car, Marcus didn't speak for a while. Finally, he said, "She likes you." Kyle let out a shaky laugh. "I don't know why. I don't deserve it." Marcus turned the key in the ignition. "Maybe not. But she sees the man you could be, not the one you were." Kyle stared out the window, watching the trees blur past. "You think I can ever make things right?" Marcus gave a faint, thoughtful smile. "Not with her. You already did that today. Now it's time to make things right with yourself." That night, back in his apartment, Kyle pinned the quote above his bed. He looked at it for a long time before whispering, "Move forward anyway." Then, for the first time in years, he slept peacefully. But somewhere deep in his heart, he felt a new sense of unease, like a shadow waiting just beyond the light. He didn't know it yet, but the peace he had found was about to be tested, and not everyone in his past was ready to let him change. Outside his window, thunder rumbled again, and the city lights flickered, as if warning him that the calm he'd earned was only temporary. For weeks after his meeting with Mrs. Grace, Kyle's life began to feel almost normal. He worked long hours at Hope Center, helped fix broken homes, painted walls, and listened to stories from people who had lived far harder lives than his own. Every evening he'd go home tired but calm, something he hadn't felt in years. The nightmares that used to wake him in cold sweats started to fade. For the first time, he began to believe that maybe redemption was possible. But peace never stays quiet for long. It was a Thursday afternoon when the past came knocking. Literally. Kyle was closing up the Hope Center for the day, stacking boxes by the door, when he heard a voice behind him, a voice he hadn't heard in years. "Well, look who finally found religion." Kyle froze. That voice was like a ghost. He turned slowly, and his stomach dropped. Standing in the doorway was Derek Ross, his former drinking buddy, and the worst influence he'd ever had. Derek looked the same, scruffy beard, greasy jacket, a smirk that always carried trouble. "Derek," Kyle muttered, his chest tightening. "What are you doing here?" Derek stepped inside, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. "Word on the street is, you're doing charity work now." "Mr. Nice Guy, helping old folks." "Didn't think I'd live to see it." Kyle sighed. "People change." "Not you," Derek sneered. "You're still the same man who used to throw the first punch when someone looked at you wrong. You just found a new crowd to fool." Kyle clenched his fists but kept his voice steady. "I'm not that man anymore." Derek laughed darkly. "Yeah? Tell that to the old lady you smacked. You think playing volunteer washes that away?" Kyle's jaw tightened. "Leave her out of this." But Derek wasn't done. "You know, I heard about that. The FBI guy who showed up? His mom, right? That's why you're keeping your nose clean now, because you're scared." Kyle stepped forward. "I said leave." Derek smirked and leaned in close. "Scared little Kyle. Doing good deeds so the feds don't lock you up again." Something inside Kyle burned, but he took a deep breath and turned away. "Get out, Derek." Derek chuckled and walked around him. "Fine. But before I go, you might want to hear this. There's a guy looking for you. Some bar owner you owed money to says you ran off with a few thousand before your last job went south. He's not happy." Kyle froze. His chest tightened again. That was a part of his life he thought was buried forever. "That debt's gone," he said quietly. Derek smirked. "Not to him. Word is, he's digging. He knows where you work now." And with that, Derek turned and left, his laugh echoing down the empty hall. Kyle stood there for a long time, the silence pressing against him. His past, the one he tried so hard to bury, was clawing its way back. He felt the anger he'd been holding down for months begin to rise, but this time, it was different. It didn't explode. It burned slow and deep, like fire under ice. That evening, Marcus called. "How's it going at the center?" he asked. Kyle hesitated. "Fine," he lied. Marcus caught it immediately. "You sure?" "Yeah," Kyle said quickly. "Just tired." Marcus's voice softened. "Tired is okay. Just don't go silent. Silence breeds old demons." Kyle didn't answer. He couldn't tell Marcus about Derek. Not yet. 2 days later, the trouble came for real. Kyle arrived at Hope Center early, only to find the front door smashed open. He rushed inside, boxes overturned, windows cracked, walls vandalized with spray paint. The words scrawled across the main wall made his blood run cold, "You can't hide forever." He felt his throat close. His hands began to shake. Whoever did this wasn't just sending a message, they wanted him scared. Marcus showed up within the hour. Police cars surrounded the building. "Kyle, what the hell happened?" he demanded. Kyle's voice was low. "It's my fault." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. Kyle took a deep breath. "A man from my past showed up. Derek Ross. He said someone's looking for me, a guy I owed money to years ago. I thought that life was behind me." Marcus's jaw tightened. "You didn't think to tell me?" Kyle's voice broke slightly. "I didn't want to drag you into my mess again." Marcus looked around the wrecked room, then back at him. "You already did." The tension between them was thick. But underneath Marcus's anger was something else, concern. "Listen," he said finally, lowering his voice. "If someone's threatening you, we can protect you. But you need to tell me everything." Kyle hesitated. "This man, Victor Hayes. He ran an illegal gambling ring. I worked for him once. Delivered things. Collected payments. When I left, I owed him money. He said he'd come for me if I ever showed my face again." Marcus stared at him, silent for a long moment. "Then it looks like he kept his promise." Kyle felt the guilt crawl up his spine. "This place, the people here, they don't deserve this." Marcus nodded. "Which is why we'll stop him. But Kyle, you need to stay calm. You've come too far to fall back now." Kyle looked at him, his eyes hard. "If he comes for me again, I won't run." Marcus's gaze darkened. "Don't do something stupid. You're not that man anymore." Kyle didn't respond. He turned away, staring at the words on the wall, "You can't hide forever." That night, as the rain returned, Kyle sat alone in his apartment, staring at the door, waiting for a knock that might come any minute. The shadows outside flickered with passing headlights, and his mind swirled with thoughts of the man he used to be, and the man he was trying to become. He whispered to himself, "You can't hide forever. Maybe it's time I stopped trying." Somewhere across the city, Marcus sat at his desk, scanning the database for Victor Hayes. His instincts told him this wouldn't end quietly. The storm had returned, and this time, it wasn't only Kyle's redemption on the line, it was his life. The rain outside grew heavier, tapping against the window like a countdown. The past had found him. And it wasn't leaving without a fight. The city was drenched in stormlight that night, heavy rain and flashing skies, thunder rolling through every street like the sound of something inevitable. Kyle stood at his apartment window, staring down at the quiet road below, feeling that strange stillness that comes before chaos. He hadn't slept. He hadn't even changed clothes since Marcus left. The spray-painted words still burned in his mind, "You can't hide forever." He knew what they meant. Victor Hayes was close. Kyle had lived most of his life running, from people, from guilt, from himself. But this time, there was nowhere left to run. And somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered that maybe this confrontation wasn't just fate, maybe it was the only way he could finally earn his peace. At 2 a.m., the knock came. 3 slow taps. Kyle's heart pounded, but his voice was steady when he said, "Come in." The door creaked open, and there he was, Victor Hayes, taller than Kyle remembered, dressed in a dark coat, eyes sharp and cold as glass. 2 men stood behind him, silent, dangerous. "Well," Victor said slowly, stepping inside. "The prodigal son returns. I thought you were smarter than to stay in one place this long." Kyle swallowed hard. "I don't work for you anymore, Victor." Victor smirked. "Oh, I know. I've been watching you. Helping old ladies, painting fences, what a redemption story." He chuckled. "But see, redemption doesn't pay debts." Kyle's jaw tightened. "You got your money back years ago." Victor shook his head slowly. "You think a man like me forgets what's owed? You disappeared. That's disrespect. You embarrassed me." The room went still. Kyle's pulse thudded in his ears. "I'm not the same man you used to own." Victor took a step closer. "Oh, I can see that." The old Kyle would have thrown the first punch. The new one just stands there pretending he's found God. Kyle's voice dropped. "Maybe I found something better." Victor's smirk faltered for just a second. "And what's that?" "Peace," Kyle said quietly. Victor laughed, a hard, bitter sound that filled the room. "Peace doesn't exist for men like us. You can dress it up, hide it behind charity and apologies, but deep down, you're still the same broken fool who hid an old woman because the world hurt him first." Kyle froze. "You know about that?" Victor's grin widened. "Everyone knows. You made headlines. The man who slapped an old lady. What was it again? Her son was FBI?" Before Kyle could answer, another voice came from the shadows behind Victor. "That would be me." Marcus stepped forward, gun drawn, badge visible under the dim light. "Put your hands where I can see them, Victor." Victor's smirk vanished. "Grace. I was wondering when you'd show up." Marcus's tone was cold and controlled. "You've been threatening a federal witness. That's enough to bury you for life." Victor chuckled. "Witness? He's a criminal." Marcus didn't blink. "He's also a man trying to fix what he broke. You, on the other hand, are still breaking everything you touch." The room held its breath. Thunder boomed outside. Victor's men reached for their jackets, but Marcus's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Don't." His gun didn't waver. "I won't ask twice." Kyle's heart raced. He could feel the storm building between them, a storm that had nothing to do with the weather. Victor's cold eyes darted between Marcus and Kyle. "You think you can save him?" he said. "Men like him don't change. Men like us never do." Marcus's jaw tightened. "You're wrong." Suddenly, Victor lunged, grabbing a metal rod from the floor. Kyle moved before he could think, instincts taking over. He tackled Victor, both of them crashing into the table. The gun fired once, echoing through the room. Silence followed. Kyle lay on the floor, ears ringing, the smell of gunpowder in the air. Slowly, he looked up. Marcus was standing over them, gun steady. One of Victor's men lay unconscious near the door, the other had fled. Victor was groaning, clutching his arm where the bullet had grazed him. Marcus stepped forward, pressing his badge to Victor's face. "It's over." Victor laughed weakly. "You think this changes anything? He'll always be what he is." Marcus glanced at Kyle, who was breathing heavily but calm. "No," Marcus said. "He's already something different." The sirens arrived minutes later, red and blue lights painting the rain-slick street. Officers swarmed the building, handcuffing Victor and his men. As they were led out, Victor turned one last time, his voice cutting through the noise. "You'll see, Kyle. You can't wash away blood with good deeds." Kyle didn't respond. He just watched as the man disappeared into the flashing lights. When the chaos settled, Marcus stood beside him. Both men were drenched, silent. Finally, Kyle said softly, "I didn't want this to end in violence." Marcus holstered his gun. "Sometimes violence finds you anyway. What matters is what you do next." Kyle looked down, shaking his head. He was right about one thing. "I can't erase who I was." Marcus turned to him. "You're not supposed to. You're supposed to learn from it." The rain outside slowed, falling gently now. Kyle stepped out onto the porch, letting the drops hit his face. For the first time, he didn't feel the weight of shame, just the quiet strength of having faced it. He looked at Marcus. "Tell your mother, thank you. For everything." Marcus gave a small smile. "You can tell her yourself. She'll want to hear it from you." Kyle nodded, eyes lifted to the dark sky breaking open into dawn. "Maybe I will. Maybe it's time." Marcus started to leave, but then turned back. "Kyle," he said. "You did good tonight." Kyle's lips curved into a tired smile. "I finally stopped running." Marcus nodded once, then walked toward his car. As the first light of morning spilled over the wet streets, Kyle stood alone, breathing in the cool air. The storm had passed. The past had caught up, and this time, he had faced it. He knew there would always be scars. But now, they didn't define him. They reminded him. And for the first time in his life, Kyle felt free. Somewhere, not far away, Mrs. Gray sat by her window, sipping her tea. The rain had ended. She smiled faintly and whispered, as if to the wind itself, "I told you, son, people can change."